Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another session of Converge 2023, the RoboHead User Conference. My name is Eric Fredrickson, and I'm a technical support specialist. Today, we're going to be talking about how to tame your project form, basically how to make sure that you can maintain it, that you want to maintain it, and that you're not afraid to go back in there and make changes. First, a couple pieces of housekeeping. Please use the chat to answer any questions and engage. For more entries to win prizes, review us on G2. And remember that recordings will be available after the session. And of course, thanks again for being here. So forms are powerful tools. They can become massive treasure troves of data that you can use for all kinds of things. You can collect, organize, process, and report on data. But you need people to be putting in data. The forms only work if your team uses them, and the team will only use them if they match the team's current needs. If you just throw a form together and never look at it again, what's going to happen is that it's probably not very well planned out, and eventually it's going to be just completely outdated. It'll have questions and sections that don't apply to the team anymore. It'll have request information that the user just doesn't have or need, and that can cause a problem. No two forms are alike because no two teams are alike. Your form has to match your workflow. So with a hastily built form, you'll find that users will struggle to adopt using your form. They'd rather just send a quick email. It's a lot less of a burden on them. Maintenance becomes more difficult for you. Are people even using that field? You don't know. And reporting doesn't work without data. You need the data for the reporting to matter. So what are some of the big traps that you can fall into when building your form or updating your form? Well, you can end up with a lot of same named fields that make it really confusing as to which field you want to report on. You might have a point of contact field for every different deliverable type. And then if you just name them all point of contact, then when you go to report on them, you see this. And that's a headache. That's a lot of troubleshooting to figure out which one is which. You can have too many required fields. There's some information you need to take a request in, and that's how it's always going to be. But each required field is more sort of cognitive load for the person filling out the form. It is something that they have to remember. It's information they have to have ready, and every layer you add to that is another thing for them to go, oh, I don't have time for this right now, or to say, oh, I don't have that information, I'll come back to it. And maybe they'll forget, maybe they won't come back. If you have too many differences between your project and request forms, that can also make maintenance difficult and time consuming, because instead of being able to just copy your form, you're having to redo a bunch of work. And maybe you're not sure what work you did. How exactly did you, word that rule? What exactly was the rule supposed to do? You can also have too many aspects dependent on different users. People are promoted, they move to new teams, they change responsibilities. And so if you have a lot of rules that depend on certain specific users, those can become outdated and be another thing that you have to maintain. And of course, there's haphazard rules. You want to make a rule for everything, but it's important to make sure that in the process you build meaningful, useful rules so that they are easy to work with later and are easy to understand. Okay, so what do I do? Well, first and foremost, you can always contact RoboHead support. We always want to hear from you for questions, complex and straightforward alike. We'd rather you call upon us than pull out your hair. So chat us, email us, call us, whatever method you prefer. But there's also a lot of things that you can do, on your own time, on the off time, and be ready. So a few things to remember. Rules execute in order from top to bottom on the form, so that might help you order your rules more effectively. It doesn't matter which section a field is in on each form, as long as it's the same field. So when you're adding a field to one form, create it on one, then go to the existing field section on the other, rather than recreating it. Field options sync between forms, so you don't have to create those twice. And one important thing to remember is that if you make a mistake that you can't easily resolve, we can roll the form back to an earlier version. While we can't do that super frequently, it's always there as the nuclear option to get you back to a version of the form that works. So it's always there. You can always call us and ask for it. So forms and fields and form changes. As I mentioned before, use unique field names. Instead of point of contact, do a point of contact copy, point of contact design. You can also, if you want to have it say point of contact for the user on the form, you can use the form display label and the field name to differentiate them internally without making them different externally. So that's always an option. And so when you go to report, you'll see the field name. But if you look at the form itself as a user, you'll see the form display label. Keep notes as you're building the form. Keep notes on what changes you're making, what what the expectation of certain fields is, things like that. One cool thing you can do is you can actually track your changes within RoboHead. We talked with Mark from Tyler Tech about his methods for tracking form changes. They have a pretty extensive form with hundreds of rules, lots of different sections. It's a very powerful and effective, but also very complex form. So what Mark has done is he has a project type in his RoboHead form for changes to RoboHead. It sounds a little recursive, but it does exactly what RoboHead's designed for. It gets all the data in one place. You never use it anytime you need to edit the form. You never make changes without someone filling out a project for that change. And then you never have to forget who requested it, why they requested it, what change they made, when they asked for it. And that alone saves a lot of time and a lot of headaches. It's a lot easier to roll back a form to a certain time. It's a lot easier to know why changes were made. And you can also use that in conjunction with user group rules to limit visibility so that only internal clients and maybe even, say only administrators or only administrators and project managers can see um, that field option. So you're not exposing, your external clients to options that they're not going to use or would wonder about. Another thing that you can do is you can reuse fields to keep things simple. For example, that point of contact field, rather than having 6 or 7 different points of contact, you can make a section called point of contact and then a field called point of contact and just have that show up every time in each different project, deliverable type. And that gives you one field that has all the data in it. And you can also report, say you just want, you want to report on just projects of a certain type. You're only going to get those items from that field too. So it's not like you're creating a jumble of useless data by having all that data in one field. It's all that data, but it's connected to a bunch of other stuff that keeps it, easy to parse. Another thing to do is limit required fields. It's important to remember, as we mentioned before, you need some information to get the project started, but chances are you're going to have to go back to your stakeholders and talk to them before you finish the project. So rather than trying to get every single piece of data on the first try, get the important stuff, get all the crucial stuff that you absolutely cannot work without, and make the other stuff optional. And if they have the data, they'll fill it out. If they don't have the data yet, well, they'll leave it blank, but then they got the project into you and you can get the work started. And you can go back to them later and fill in those blanks. Another important thing is to include stakeholders in update plans. This is another thing that I talked with Mark from Tyler Tech about. Um, when you make changes to the form, that affects the whole team. And again, if you are putting fields in there that sound useful to you, but you haven't talked to anyone about them, they may not be something that your team's going to need. And the more streamlined your form is to fit those needs, and the more detail, the more the details match what your team expects, the more they're going to use them, the more those requesters are going to use them. So talk to the people that will be using the form to find out what their expectations are. And then you're going to get a really effective, powerful form that they're going to be drawn to use rather than avoiding. Another way to communicate with your users is to use the instructional field. This is one of our newer field types in the application, and what it allows you to do is add read-only text to really anywhere on the form. You can use one between every single field if you want to. You can use one at the top of each section, and this way you can tell users exactly what you expect, and then they're going to be able to use the fields exactly how you want them to. It's also important to build good rules. So, for example, user role and user group rules. Rather than, if you have too many rules that are based on contacting specific people, again, people come and go, but teams and groups stick around. If you build rules based on teams rather than people, those rules are more likely to stay relevant and less likely to need frequent updating. And again, and also email messages that the form sends out can be addressed based on project permissions rather than on specific users. So you could have the email message go to just the manage users or just the contribute users. And then you're not having to update the rule when that one person who is on all those rules leaves. You can just keep going. We also have ways to track rules in the application. You want to use clear, well-defined rule names to start with. But then also, if you go over to that rules tab and click on view rules, that's going to bring up a screen that has every single rule with every single piece of that rule listed out. And if you want to do it just in the browser, you can hit Control F or Command F and just word search in there, or you can download it to a PDF. And downloading a rules PDF after each big form change is another great way to track those changes, just like with the different the different projects that we talked about building in RoboHead to track those changes. This is another way to have a tangible, searchable recording of the way things were and the way things are. So again, thanks for joining us. This has been a session on how to make your form less of a headache for the you that will exist tomorrow by taking some measures that you can do today. Up next, we'll have a session with our marketing manager, Abby Hatch, and she'll be talking about the data behind project requests. So please stick around for that. Stay tuned and have a great day. Thank you.